Hayley Dodd was a 17-year-old girl who went missing on July 29, 1999, in Badgingarra, Western Australia. She was last seen hitchhiking along Northwest Road, and after that, she disappeared without a trace. Her disappearance prompted a large-scale investigation, with law enforcement and volunteers conducting extensive searches in the area. Despite their efforts, no sign of Hayley was found for years. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the most notorious and tragic cases in Australian history, the murder of Hayley Dodd. Who killed her and why? And what happened to her body? Let's find out. Background. Hayley Dodd was born on October 30th, 1981, in Perth, Western Australia. She was the middle child of Ray and Margaret Dodd, who had 5 children in total. Hayley had 2 older sisters, Tony and Rayline, and 2 younger brothers, Lenny and Shane. The bright and athletic teen had her heart set on becoming either a veterinarian or a teacher, but she wanted to see more of Australia before making that commitment. She left for Western Australia with her best friend Lisa the day after she graduated from high school in 1999. They intended to spend a few months away from home, not merely sightseeing along the route. To pay for their lodging, food, and transportation, the young women planned to take temporary jobs along the way. Hitchhiking between cities wasn't a crazy concept for them back in the 1990s in Australia. At the time, there had been some high-profile murders of young women who were hitchhiking around the country, but this was not enough to inspire widespread panic. Hayley was worried that even if she went with a buddy, her parents would not let her go alone. That's why she told them she'd be taking the bus. She and Lisa went to Badgingarra at the end of July. There, they planned to put in a day's work as farmhands. They were at a campground where they could acquire a bed for the night for a modest charge. Due to their low prices, such establishments are not very popular in Australia. Hayley had a few days to kill before starting her new job, so she went to visit some friends at their farm 200 kilometers away. Lisa didn't want her to hitch a ride there by herself when she made up her mind to go. Even yet, Hayley reassured her that everything was fine and that she would see her again in a few days. Lisa gave Hayley some money and a folding knife so that Hayley could protect herself and call her from the phone booth before they parted ways. At around 8 a.m., she said her goodbyes and set out on her journey. Hayley failed to appear to the farm as expected, disappointing her relatives and friends. Concerned, they phoned her mom to tell her the news. The woman quickly dialed 911 out of concern for her daughter's safety. She immediately called an emergency number and relayed the details of the event. The operator decided there was no immediate danger and suggested she go to the police station to report her disappearance. Indeed, this is what she did. After starting to piece together a timeline of events, the detectives set out to find Hayley. They started out by going straight to Lisa's campsite. After hearing that her buddy had never arrived at the farm, the young woman gave the police a detailed introduction despite her shame. She gave the police a detailed account of Hayley's outfit that day, right down to a sketch of the earring Hayley was wearing. A few days before the event, Hayley had gone out and purchased these earrings. She and Lisa had gone shopping for a little self-care, and the young lady found this jewelry to be appealing. She had no idea that the earring would eventually help solve the horrible mystery of her abduction. The missing woman's story and description were spread far and wide by the police. Hayley was almost 18 years old, yet she didn't appear a day over 16. She stood at a height of 152 centimeters and had a body mass index of little over 40. The authorities soon tracked down the first potential eyewitness. The police were able to locate the first witness fairly quickly. It turned out to be the truck driver who had given her a ride that day. According to the man's story, she had knocked on his cab window at a gas station and asked for a ride to Mora, a town near where there was a farm. The trucker was on his way to another town, but he agreed to give her a ride most of the way. The man dropped her off at a turnoff above 50 kilometers from Mora near the town, Badgingarra, where she was to turn off the main road and onto a country road. According to the trucker, Hayley was in high spirits, chatting with him the whole way and talking about her journey. After she said she was almost out of money, he gave her $15 so the young woman could buy something to eat. The man also left her his number in case she hitchhiked back. He made trips down that road almost every day and could have let her down again. Later, detectives received several more calls from people who had seen Hayley in that area. Based on their statements, police concluded that the young woman had been on foot along the Northwest Road towards Mora. Apparently, she could not find any driver at the gas station to give her a ride. For this reason, she decided to walk along the road and try to hitch a ride. Based on the testimony of the next witness, he gave Hayley a ride to the turnoff on Goondair Dole Road, after which she headed further in her direction on foot. The next witness was a woman driving along the road. She spotted Hayley just as the young woman was getting out of her car and moving on foot towards Mora. In all, the police were contacted by more than 10 witnesses. After putting their statements together, detectives concluded that the young woman was last seen at about 12 noon on the Northwest Road, about 50 kilometers from Mora. There was another witness, though. He had not seen Hayley but still shared a disturbing observation with police. The man pulled over on the side of the Northwest Road because his engine was overheating. At one point, he heard a dog barking followed by a piercing female scream. He couldn't see the source of the sound as it might have been far enough away. The road passed through an empty flat area where there was virtually no extraneous noise. With all this information in hand, the police's prognosis was disappointing from the start. Lead Detective Eddie Rowe decided that they should look for the body and not consider the possibility that Hayley might be alive. But management forbade him to investigate in such a manner, leaving it to the status of the search for the missing person. It's worth clarifying here that a murder investigation would have given the police more options than a missing person investigation, but the police had no leads that could help. They get on the young woman's trail, so they quickly set about looking for potential kidnappers. In a short time, they were able to identify several dozen suspects who lived in the area, but eventually the police focused on 3 men. One worked as a teacher at a local school, another was a part-time gardener there, and the third lived not far from where Hayley disappeared. One questioned each of them, pleaded negligence, and provided alibis. The police could not conclude with certainty of their innocence, but they could not find any evidence to the contrary. But soon the situation changed dramatically. The investigators were approached by a neighbor of one of the suspects, a 43-year-old school gardener named Francis Wark. He told them that the day Hayley disappeared, Francis borrowed his car to go shopping in Mora. When the man returned home around 1 p.m., a neighbor noticed damage inside the car. The turn signal knob was broken, and the dashboard also showed signs of impact. The neighbor didn't even have time to ask what happened to the car. Francis came home, dumped with the shopping bags in the kitchen, got on his motorcycle, and drove off. This story seemed strange to the police, and they decided to re-interview Francis. The man said that at the time of Hayley's disappearance, he was many kilometers away from the alleged place of her abduction. According to his story, after returning home, he immediately went to a party in the city of Perth on his motorcycle, but he was not supposed to get there that day. On the way there, he exceeded the speed limit and had a serious accident that took him to the hospital. The information available was enough for detectives to ask the perfectly logical question: where was he going in such a hurry? His own testimony seemed very strange, and investigators decided to apply for a search warrant of his home. The officers searched his residence, but they were unable to find any potential evidence. They also searched the car and removed the seat covers so that experts could examine them in the lab. Unfortunately, none of this yielded any results, and Francis was left alone. Just immediately after that, he moved to the other side of the country, to Queensland, and the detectives were left empty-handed, and the case went into a long drawer. They tried to find new witnesses and evidence to move the investigation forward, but to no avail. The breakthrough. In 2013, a cold case review of the evidence discovered an earring, believed to have belonged to Hayley, in the fibers of a car seat cover, seized in 1999 from a vehicle driven by Francis John Wark. Wark was a 65-year-old convicted rapist who owned a property near where Hayley was last seen. He had a history of picking up women on remote roads and violently assaulting them. In 2007, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison for raping a 31-year-old woman in Queensland. He was extradited to Perth in 2015 and charged with Hayley's murder. The prosecution argued that Wark had lured Hayley into his ute, then killed her and disposed of her body somewhere on his property or nearby. They presented evidence that matched Wark's DNA to the earring found in his car seat cover, and that showed that the earring was identical to the one Hayley was wearing on the day she disappeared. They also presented witness testimony from a woman who claimed that Wark had confessed to killing Hayley while they were both in prison. The defense denied Wark's involvement, and claimed that he had an alibi. They said that Wark was shopping in Mora at the time Hayley went missing, and that he had never met her or seen her before. They also challenged the reliability of the DNA evidence and the witness testimony, and pointed out that there was no body, no weapon, no motive, and no other physical evidence linking Wark to the crime. The trials. The case went to trial twice, once in 2018 before a judge without a jury, and once in 2021 before a jury. The first trial ended with Wark being found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a 21-year non-parole period. The second trial ended with Wark being acquitted of murder but found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 18 years in prison, the longest sentence ever imposed in Western Australia for that offense. The first trial was based on circumstantial evidence and the judge's assessment of Wark's credibility as a witness. The judge found that Wark had lied about his whereabouts on the day Hayley disappeared and that he had killed her either intentionally or recklessly. The judge also rejected Wark's claim that he had obtained the earring from another woman he had picked up on the road. The second trial was based on similar evidence, but also included testimony from a woman who had been raped by Wark in Queensland in 2007. The woman described how Wark had picked her up on a remote road, hit her over the head with a piece of wood, tied her up with rope, and sexually abused her for hours before she managed to escape. The prosecution argued that this showed Wark had a tendency to pick up women and violently attack them. The jury deliberated for 11.5 hours before acquitting Wark of murder, but finding him guilty of manslaughter. The reasons for the jury's verdict will always remain confidential, but it appeared they were not satisfied Wark intended to kill Hayley or that he acted recklessly. Wark appealed his conviction and sentence, but his appeal was dismissed by the Supreme Court in May 2023. He argued that there was insufficient evidence to prove his guilt beyond reasonable doubt, and that his sentence was manifestly excessive. The court rejected his arguments and upheld his conviction and sentence. The aftermath. Hayley's family has never given up hope of finding her remains and giving her a proper burial. They have pleaded with Wark to reveal what he did with her body, but he has always maintained his innocence and refused to cooperate. Hayley's mother, Margaret Dodd, said that she will never stop fighting for justice for her daughter. Margaret Dodd and her daughter Toni confronted Wark in court and read their victim impact statements. They described the pain and anguish they had suffered for the past 2 decades and the impact Hayley's disappearance had on their lives. They said they felt betrayed by the justice system and that Wark deserved to die in prison. Wark will be eligible for parole in 2035, age 79. However, under WA's no body, no parole laws, he will not be given parole unless he reveals the last known location of Hayley's remains. You can't keep going on like you haven't done it. You have done it. You know you've done it. Just tell us where she is so we can rest. Our lives have been in limbo for 22 years, she said on March 31st, after a jury found Wark guilty of manslaughter. The 2 key pieces of evidence linking Wark to Hayley's death were the discovery of a unique earring, matching the ones Hayley wore the day she disappeared, found tangled in the seat cover inside his ute. A hair found in the passenger footwell of the car was DNA tested, and a mixed profile revealed it was highly likely one of the profiles belonged to Hayley. This case is heartbreaking and infuriating. It also shows how persistent and courageous Hayley's family has been in their quest for closure and accountability. I hope that one day they will find out what happened to Hayley and where she is. Conclusion. That's all for today's video. I hope you learned something new and interesting about this case. What do you think of it? Do you think Wark got what he deserved? Do you think there is any chance of finding Hayley's body? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel for more true crime stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.